Your host, Marilyn Rosa-Green. I'm an executive leadership coach and HR strategist. I designed MSA to help manufacturing executives and their teams transform from a reactive, unproductive, and unhealthy culture to a powerhouse of high engagement, high performance, and high retention. On today's call, we'll address a question my clients ask me often, and that is, how do I get my team to do what I need them to do? To answer this question, I've invited a bright and experienced man, Rick Park, someone in my network who I've enjoyed getting to know and learn from over the last year or so. Before we dive in, let me quickly tell you a little bit about Rick. Rick partners with executive business leaders to create a competitive advantage through people. With experience in assessment design, workforce development, performance management, and other critical people systems, Rick transitioned into HR executive roles to support CEOs and executives globally. He has worked in technology with big names like Dell, Microsoft, also manufacturing and HR consulting. Currently, Rick leads Talent Alignment LLC, an HR consulting firm, where he focuses on delivering competitive advantage through people and effectively communicates with executive leaders. He holds a Ph.D. in industrial and organizational psychology. And most recently, Rick has a chapter book that will be available as of July 11th called When Work Works. His chapter focuses on what business leaders can do to focus their workforce on winning in the marketplace. So welcome, Rick. I hope I
Thank
did
you,
you
Marilyn.
justice with the intro.
Yeah, pleasure. Thank you. No, I think you hit it all, Marilyn. I am excited to be here. I too have a ton of respect for you. We've had a great short time together, and thank you for having me today. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining in. How's the weather in your area?
Usually don't tell anybody this, but usually Seattle, oh, already. Seattle is sunny and bright in the summer, and it's sunny and bright here. So
Beautiful.
we sort of keep that secret, but it's
Yes.
a beautiful day.
It's usually about 100 degrees in Kansas, right in the middle of summer, but we got a little bit of rain last night and it's about 80 degrees today. So today it feels like it's
Ah,
chilly. That's how much of a extreme from one day to another it is here in Kansas, but all good, enjoying it.
yeah.
Yeah. So I thought it would be fun to talk about how we know each other, because I am going to do other interviews like this, and it's going to be with people that are in my network that I've consulted with or for, just network, interviewed, hired, those kinds of things. So it's just people that have been in my network that I've gotten to know and can help me give resources to my clients and the people that followed me on LinkedIn. So I thought I'd let you answer this. How do we know each other? I thought it'd be fun.
This too is a very fascinating story. It all started with, like, I applied for a HR business partner job here in the Seattle area, and you had a contract with that company, and you had contracted with them to help them recruit for that job. So I was a candidate, and you were the outsourced recruiter at the time, and it didn't take me long to sort of say, this is a lot of fun. It doesn't feel like an interview. It feels like just a conversation. And from there, we just stayed in touch, and it's been a
Wonderful. I
pleasure.
know sometimes you know, uh, we say things that maybe we mean at the time, but it's really hard to keep up, right? And staying in touch with folks. But that's one of the things that I do in my Manufacturing Success Accelerator program is I consult my clients on how to improve their talent acquisition process, to streamline it, but also to really change the way in that we interview and coach their interviewers so that they are engaging the applicants, that get to really know them, and also create this pipeline, because sometimes things don't work out that the way that we planned them, and we can hire everybody, but maybe there's something else down the road. And so leaving people with a positive impression when they interview with your company is so important. So I was in the midst of helping this company and in their growth. They had several openings, and they needed I did leadership coaching with them and all that fun stuff. And when I interviewed you, I thought, I mean, it was just great. It was just great. And I
Yeah.
thought, I think it would be great to see where Rick ends up going next and what happens with him. And so I'm so glad that you opened up to the idea of even partnering up and other things that I've been working on. And
Yeah.
you've always been a
My pleasure,
pleasure
and we both
to.
agree they made a
Yeah.
mistake when they went with another candidate.
Exactly. You're amazing. How could they not? But ultimately I can only advise, right? My clients, they don't
Yeah.
really do
Oh, no blame on
everything.
you, that's for sure. I'm
Um,
sure you did the right thing, so.
yeah. And I was actually in process of really finalizing my 4 systems for my program, and that was definitely a learning experience for
Mhm.
me. Is to and it ties up really nicely. And how do I take my strategy and convert that into performance? And that experience definitely helped me and gather more data for my future clients, and make sure that they are selecting the right talent for their openings.
Yeah.
So it was all in all a great. You've been like a case study for me,
Yeah,
so
thank
I
you. I
appreciate
am.
that.
Yep. I'm a wonky one, but a good one anyway, so thank you. No, it is funny
Absolutely.
what you just said. It's like most people think about their own development and they automatically go to training. But what you just said was your experience helped you to build some capabilities and filling that job and getting to know that client and all those other things. So people don't often think about the things that they do with respect to developing their skills, but I love the example you gave. That's a perfect one.
Yeah, thank you. So circling back on the question that my clients come to me with, how do I get Marilyn? This is a struggle. How do I just make them do basically what I need them to do? And what we're talking about here is it's about strategy. How do we convert strategy into company performance? And it's been a big question in your career. And so please feel free
Yeah.
to paraphrase the question, or dive a little bit deeper into that. But if you can give us some information and educate us, I would love to hear how you answer this and how you support your
Yeah.
clients.
It's a really fun question, and I will tell you for many years I sort of danced all over it and I never really felt all that comfortable in my answer, but I feel good about it now. I think it plays out pretty well. Of course, I'm still on a journey and who knows what will happen next week, but for now, this makes sense to me. Um, I think it holds true for all staff type roles, all staff departments. All staff departments should think that they're there to create a competitive advantage for the business. And it's not very common that you find departments that think that way. They think we're here doing finance and accounting. It has to be accurate and we're reporting and all those other things. But if you think about it, they need to be, at least in the finance perspective, they need to be really close to what the business wants to do in order to at least fund the things that make sense and sort of figure out how the funding happens and all those other things. So it's a continuum. You can be a specialist, a functional expert, but as you move up this value chain, you start to become more of a strategic partner. So to me, that's as you move up that continuum, you become more positioned to create a competitive advantage. So that's the way I think about HR and other staff groups now. Um, in terms of the approach that I'm advocating now, pardon me, it's really a systems approach. And it's not the only approach, but I think it has a lot of value. If you think about systems, you could very easily substitute the word process. And to me, your processes are really sort of pipelines to your people. And by that, I mean, there's this really sort of, there should be a strategy, and then there's this pipeline that ultimately hits the team and ultimately hits the individual. So how do you connect people to where the business wants to go from a competitive standpoint? So it's a, it is funny. Oftentimes I'll ask clients, what's your strategy? And I get a shoulder shrug or something like that. And somebody knows what the strategy is, but not many people do. So I'm a big advocate of making that really, to the extent you don't like show all your cards to all employees, but you make it as clear as you can so that people understand why they're doing what they're doing. But back to the systems piece, um, how do you take strategy and sort of convert it down to team level and people level? Well, there are six processes that actually help convert strategy to what people should do. The first is selection. Everybody knows this. We've all had open roles and we've all tried to fill those. Um, but at the same time, you can fill the job for the job, or you can fill the job for the strategy. And ideally, you do both. So, for an example, if your strategy is a low cost strategy, meaning all your competitors are going to spend more than you, but your margins are going to be thicker simply because you spend less to do the same thing. Very, very rough, but that's how that feels. So if you're in a low cost position, why not ask the question, what have you done to save costs in your previous employers? How what is so why is cost important to this business? How do you think about cost, and what have you done in your work to help deliver low cost? So those
And
are,
you're speaking, sorry, you're just making sure I understand. So you're speaking, and for our audience as well, you're speaking about the types of questions that we ask during the selection process, right? That
yeah,
the strategy, the organizational strategy has to be aligned directly with literally not just the process of entering, but the types of questions that we're asking,
yep,
and
yep.
understanding what type of information, what kind of responses we should be expecting, and then also how to rate them so that they are in alignment with the strategy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all the nits down in the weeds, and boy, I can go forever on that stuff. Like the scaling and the
Mm-hmm.
note taking and
Yeah.
I'm a big advocate of multiple interviewers
Mm-hmm.
watching the same answers, because it is fascinating how everybody picks up different things and
Yeah.
sometimes they're both right. So all that gets into the quality of the decision
Yeah.
that ultimately you'll make.
And the quality of decision making, it's so important because we find ourselves, I've seen both spectrums in with my clients. I've seen very complicated, long process, unnecessary layers of interviewees, um, uh, uh, and interviewers, right? Like, you might have, sometimes I've had some of my clients say, well, we don't have enough people to interview. We want to interview more people. And it's not really about the quantity of the people that you're interviewing, but rather the
Yep,
quality of the selection process, right?
yep,
And
yep,
also timing is really important. So when the process is very complicated and it drags on too long, it affects the quality of the selection process as well, because you
yep.
know people have other things to do and they don't want to wait forever and
Oh,
talk to,
I can speak to that
right,
one
right.
personally. I remember, like, this was 4 or 5 years ago, but I remember applying to this. I guess it was an HR director job, and went through the standard sort of ridiculous application stuff. Some of it made sense, some of it was necessary, all this other stuff. it ended with their request to me for me to spend 45 minutes taking 7 tests that they were going to use in the selection process.
Mm,
And I'm not, listen, I'm a huge advocate of testing, huge advocate of testing. But to test, to expect a candidate who could be lukewarm on the company anyway to go sit 45 minutes in front of a bunch of tests is just barbaric.
yeah,
I mean, like I said, I'm a huge advocate of
right,
testing. There's the cognitive piece, there's really no better predictor of performance. And then there's the personality screens too. But you don't throw that stuff at people you haven't even looked at their resume yet. I just don't think that's the
right,
appropriate way to approach the marketplace. And it'll turn off a bunch of candidates that
for
could have
sure.
been good.
And then
Like,
there's the other, right? There's the other flip side of this. A long process and complicated and lots of layers. And the opposite of that also is true, not enough.
yep,
One phone screening, okay, especially in
yep,
manufacturing, everything is so fast paced. Okay, you've got 50 minutes to interview, in or out, done, and then the high turnover, right? Of,
yeah.
well,
Oh,
we
I
didn't
love it. I love it.
Right, we
It's
didn't
like,
hire the right people. We didn't take enough time to get to know them. We didn't realize they didn't have these certifications or these trainings or these skills. And
yeah.
so I guess we need to let them go, right?
Oh, it's fun.
Or they walk
It,
out at lunchtime. That's my favorite. That happens quite a bit.
oh,
I'm going to the
I've been
bathroom.
doing this for so long. I've got a story for everything. It's
Right?
like
There's so many stories.
I
Yeah.
sat in a debrief meeting and somebody literally said, well, this person was an athlete in college. They have a ton of motivation. I'm going, uh, I don't know what to do with that. I don't know what to do with that. What did they actually say that makes you think that that they are motivated? What did they
Yeah.
say? You can't look, I can show up for practice and do some work, but that doesn't mean like I'm like super motivated. That's just something I did.
Yeah.
But anyway, ooh, we
So
can go
so
forever.
selection, so in selection, one thing that I picked up on, so quality of selection is very important. The
Yep.
alignment of the strategy, organizational strategy with the process of talent acquisition.
Yep.
And then what was one other takeaway?
Yeah. So I'd also add 2 things if you don't mind.
Hmm. Please.
One is that it's not always like technical in nature, like cost and savings and that's sort of a technical thing. But there are some more general skills that are important to focus on as well. Problem solving, interactivity, teamwork, all those other things.
Mhm.
So let's make sure we're broad in terms of how we're thinking about what's required for the job. Um, the second thing is there's more than just interviews too. I'm a big advocate of standardized interviews. I put together actual documents with the questions I want people to ask with rating scales that are anchored and all that other stuff. That's critical. But there's also testing, and that has at least 2 forms. One is problem solving, and another is more personality oriented, 3 forms. Then there's more specialty stuff like mechanical aptitude and spatial visualization, attention to detail, all those kinds of things. So that's the whole suite of tools that I've used with my clients to help them find the right people.
Yeah. What I often find, and something that you said reminded me of, the lack of assessments, right, is that there is a level of subjectivity in the selection process. And it's really difficult to be consistent and to have a high quality of selected new hires, especially if you're working on an expansion um, of a business, right? When you're dealing with massive hiring, which I've done a few times, it's very difficult because it's not just one person's expertise. You need a whole team to do that. And so you
Exactly.
need a very consistent and accurate, as accurate as it can be, very objective way of hiring, because you
Mhm.
can't rely on someone's brain and that person calls in, or right, or gets another job or gets promoted. How do you train that? And so you have to rely on your processes and
Yeah.
everything that comes with that, as opposed to, well, I think this person could be good for the job. I
Yeah.
think, I think to be honest with you, I think that's the biggest piece of it, which for anybody that knows me might sound crazy, because I'm such an intuitive person and I love relationship building. And as you mentioned earlier on the call, I felt like this was a conversation. It didn't feel like an interview. So I think
Right.
there's a combination of, for me, as in what I do, we have to have these processes and we have to streamline things. We have to be accurate and have good quality recruitment and hiring. However, we also have to put in the personal touch. We have to
Mhm.
coach people that are interviewing so that they are really engaging the candidates and enjoying the process, because it shouldn't be, I had one interview one time and it was, this recruiter, she brought her laptop and she put it to the side and she was just facing at her laptop the entire 20 minutes, and I was in there and I didn't feel seen. And this was very early in my career. And I remember
Yep.
thinking, I never want anybody I interview to feel like that, you know?
Yep.
So,
Yep.
so that's the other piece of, wouldn't you agree? What do you have to say
Oh,
on
yeah.
that?
I mean, it is critical. Listen, as an interviewer, you're there to get the right person. Don't get me wrong. You ask the right questions, you use the right testing, you drill down into what's required of the job, but you're also the face of the company. And one bad interview has these tentacles in the community that you work with. And honestly, I it comes back. Like I've interviewed people that have been in this regional area. This was South Georgia at the time, and they've come back and said, "Well, I've enjoyed talking with you. I didn't expect that because everything I hear is people are really, really sort of overly tough in these interviews." And I'm going, "You can be tough and expect an answer, and be kind about it, and in all those things." But you do shoot yourself in the foot to the extent that you start to build a reputation like that in the communities you're in. Last thing I'll say on this piece, um, I was really fortunate in my early career. I did a startup of a sawmill in Idabel, Oklahoma. Yes, there is an
Oh,
Idabel, Oklahoma. Getting there is very interesting. And I also started up an HR service center, same company. And we used resume screens, then we used testing, then we used interviewing, then there was a simulation. And in both cases, the GM in both of those places said, "Rick, what you did really works." And it was a nice compliment, but the tools did it. And I just helped to find, it's a discovery process. You need to find the right skills and what you're looking for
wow.
through this job analysis process, which is really dull but important. And if you do job analysis right, you find the right skills and you marry those with interview or resume screened, testing, interviewing, and simulations. You can't lose. You can't.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Yeah. And yeah, there is so much more that we can talk about selection alone, right? I think we will need like a whole hour for every
I
one
was
of
just
of
thinking,
the
it's like we
systems.
got five more things here.
But we might have to pick what we'll talk about next. But I think,
Yeah.
that the other system that I'm interested to talk about, just because I'm huge on culture,
Yep.
is I think that we should talk about that, because I know in previous conversations, we've shared what we think about culture, and I think
Yeah.
we have landed on, I think, everybody knows how important it is, and we talk about it really broadly, and it feels like I called it fluffy. It just felt like a fluffy thing, you know? And I
Yep.
think you know what I mean by fluffy. But it's just like not a real thing. Like, what is it? Right. And so
That's
to me,
ugh.
totally makes sense. But how do we look at culture from a strategy point of view and convert that into performance, company performance?
Yep. That's an excellent question. In fact, I love it, and I actually have given a couple of presentations on that, and I learned a ton just building that. But it is funny. It's one of those things. If I said rewards, everybody sort of knows what that is. There's lots of different faces and combinations of that. But everybody knows what that is. If I say development, most people know what that is. There's lots of different ways to develop people that people don't think about very often, but everybody knows what development is. There is very little consensus around what culture is, which is really, really, really important to understand. And there's lots of different experts out there that will give you lots of different answers. Like I'm a big advocate of his name's Edgar Schein. He's like he's the premier culture expert. He's written tons of books. His son has taken over his business, and it struck me in his in some of his books. He'll say culture isn't easily measurable and isn't easily definable. And I I kind of disagree. I mean, I know I built him up as a expert, but you know what? I think you can do it. You can't the trick is you can't think of it as a nebulous blob. You cannot think of it that way, or else you'll never get anywhere. So I drive it down to what does what do people expect of their coworkers? What kind of behavior do people expect of their coworkers? To me, that's measurable. That's something you can influence, and it reflects culture. So if you think about that, behavior is always going to be driven by something. And culture is one of those things. So if we take the low cost, just tie in strategy a little bit, let's actually take another approach. We have staked our business on product quality. So as a business, our culture should also be focused on product quality and all of the processes that sort of impact product quality. And that goes for the workforce. So you can't say you can't say quality is important. You have to get down to what people can do to actually promote quality. So if you think of a 360, it's an easy way to think about it. And if you had something like the title of the area was quality, dedication to quality, you can line it up with specific behaviors that are cultural in nature. For example, produces output with minimum, uh, with few errors, um, expects people to produce high quality output. So those things are behaviors, so to speak, and they actually reflect a cultural um, dimension called quality. So to me, that's where that is. If you
Yeah.
take it down to behaviors, it really answers itself. So now I have something to influence. I know how strategy can get can trickle down into culture, and I know what changes I need to make in order to move the culture forward. Um, and there's always this big debate I hear all the time about, well, what comes first, behavior or idea, or behavior or what's in your
Thoughts?
mind,
Mhm.
right? Um, I hate to sound like Skinner, but it doesn't matter. The behavior is what you want, right? And no,
Yes.
we're not rats in a box, but the behavior is what you want. And oftentimes, if everybody's sort of working the same behavior, then everybody will have a common framework with respect to
Mm.
why it's important. So I'm glad you picked that
Fascinating.
one because
Yeah,
that's
yeah. I think it's crucial to talk about it because
yep.
you know, we often address the question of why do people quit their jobs, right? What's the
Mhm,
one of the biggest struggles my clients have to deal with, and they come to me with this high turnover, and typically the work culture comes up. But
mhm,
it really is, even when you ask, candidates, about culture, or they ask you about it, you
yep,
really start to answer the question in terms of what leadership you have in place, or you expect that leadership to be like. So when I
yep,
think about culture, I do think about behavior, but um, most people, I guess, have an idea of what that is, and they might associate someone they know with that, or someone who's supposed to be
yep,
driving culture, right? And
yep,
so, it very, very common saying, it starts at the top, right? And so,
yep,
in my manufacturing success accelerator program, the first system is leadership development. But what I'm really doing is defining the culture and starting to transform, and the
yep,
way I do that is I do talk about the core values, the strengths of every individual leader, so that they understand what principles we need to use to guide the organization's decisions and actions. But I am really drawing from the executive strategy to identify
mhm,
what these core values are. And
yep,
then we go into what mission and vision you have for you as an individual and your team, and then how do we tie that to the strategy? Because I think
yep,
every person, every leader, and I work a lot with frontline leadership, they really need to define that for themselves, because I think that there is a lot of ownership and engagement, and
mhm,
something beautiful happens when they realize that their own mission and vision is more aligned to the organization than they even realize, especially
yep,
if it was a good hiring. If it was a good selection, then you're golden.
yep,
If it's not, then there's
yep.
a little bit more work that needs to be done there.
You
Right. Yeah.
yeah, you've done a nice job hitting values
Mhm.
and you know what your culture is. I'll add one more thing.
Yeah,
I
please.
love the idea of turnover as an index of culture or what people do, right? The very number one, this is research now, the number one reason people choose to leave their company is they don't believe in the mission. I mean, it's fascinating to
That
me.
is
Most people
fascinating.
go, they leave their manager or they leave for more pay. Those don't matter as much as the mission of the company, which
Yeah.
is now, I'm not saying they don't matter, they do,
Yeah.
but
Is there any
leadership
information
matters
that
to
you
some
know
degree, but
on that research on the generation, or more information about the demographics? I'm just
the
curious.
demographics,
Mhm.
that's fascinating. I that piece was not, it didn't break it down in
Yeah.
demographics.
I'm curious because
Yeah,
as I've studied,
I have an opinion, of
yeah,
course, but I
yes, absolutely. I think the thing is that we have to look at, there's a few different, there's so many variables, right? When you're reading research and trying to understand why there's high turnover. And I think that industry is crucial, because in manufacturing, the the average turnover rate is about 40%. And if you compare that to other industries, that is extremely high. It's
yep,
number two, actually. The first one being a construction has the highest turnover rate. So there's
mhm,
a lot of factors as to why that is versus other industries, right? And
yep,
so it's not just it's really hard to narrow down why across. So we have to look at, in my opinion, at the industry, and then also the demographics as well. And then we also have to look at internally what's going on with the organization, and that's where my bread and butter is. It's
yep,
I talk to organizations that are struggling, that that they have their employees disengaged, that there's high absenteeism, that negative attitude, all these behaviors right? That informs us that there is poor culture, right? There
Yeah.
isn't a strong culture. And so that is directly tied to, a good way to
Yeah.
measure that is turnover. It
You
tells
know,
us
it
a
is
whole lot.
funny. Like I said, I bring in, like, I'm a research based, but I'm also sort of experience based too. So I try to play those out. But I will tell you this, when I'm speaking with business owners and business leaders and all those other things, the number one issue now, this is sort of a generational thing because most business leaders are in your cohort, and in some cases, my cohort. We have a very different idea of what work is. And most of more senior business leaders and business owners will look at me and they're honest. They'll say people just don't want to work anymore. And the reality is they don't want to work like you work. Um, I mean,
Well, I
that's
laugh,
how
but
that
it's
is.
true. It's true. It's true. It's true.
I don't know, but you know what? I'm going to be naive. I'm going to say it's a normal curve and it's shifted down a little bit, but there are people that are in the younger generation that really want to hammer it. And it's just a matter of finding them. Fewer of them, but that's one solution to it. But the other solution is um, give a little bit, right? Meaning, okay, they want to work 8 hours and go home. That makes no sense to me, but let's give them their 8 hours of work and let them go home. I mean, it's you're doing some things on the inside that may be counter to where the generations are moving. Last thing I'll add is, and I still believe this, and it's been proven, if they don't believe in what your company's doing and why your company's doing it, then less likely to keep them. Um, I mean, some of it's hard. Like how do you make the case for a construction company? Like, um, but you can actually say we are making people's lives better. And it sounds dumb just saying it right now, but if you repeat that 100 times and people are out on the job site and they start hearing that, quality will go up. The blueprints and things will be more focused, and over time, it will become part of the way they think. So we're making people's lives better with these people will enjoy their homes,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. So that's a mission and a vision that people need to believe in. Last thing, um, 9 times out of 10, leaders and business owners will say it's about the compensation. It is not. It's like 18th rank ordered out of 24. It's 18th and 19th. Satisfaction with pay, satisfaction and pay levels. Neither of those make much of a dent. Um, and so it's hard to turn people on that. And I've been in battle after battle on that, but I'm convinced that people leave a culture and a mission and a bad boss. And once they leave, they get more money because companies just do that. And that's the reason that people will latch on to. And it's just not the case.
Yeah.
I've done 20, like I did 30 exit interviews, and every single one of them said, I was just, I didn't believe so much in the company anymore. I just wanted to do something new. I was bored doing what I'm
They
doing.
didn't feel supported. They didn't feel valued.
Yes. And
There
they
was
didn't,
nothing really keeping them there because they don't believe in the mission. And I think for um, a younger generation, if I myself included, I think, may I say so? You know, I think that
uh,
the very common thing is, work-life balance. And I think that there is something important there because look, I've worked with manufacturing companies that will work their employees, 7 days a week, right? For several months at a time. And then when they quit, and they say, well, we can't find people that want to work. Well,
Fine work.
define work, because they're asking for more work-life balance, but things are taking out of context here. And so what is the mission of the company? They have a beautiful mission written out, but are they really looking out for their employees and making sure they live by those core values that they
Yep.
have defined? And oftentimes with the work that I do, I find that um, that's not being trickled down to the bottom, right? And
Yep.
so,
Exactly.
and the frontline employees, again, I'm speaking for manufacturing, really suffer through that. And the frontline leaders are the ones that then get all this backlash and pressure and all this stress and anxiety, because they're responsible for being a liaison, right, between senior management and frontline workers. And that is a very difficult thing to do and maintain a happy marriage and household. And so there is high leadership turnover in these situations, because that is an impossible job to do. And so
Yep.
the younger the workers come in, they have learned from the older generations that, when you leave this world, people are not going to remember that you work 70 hours a week. They're just not. That's not what's really important to them. And so I think there's values to learn across generations, and again, really depending on from industry to industry and the level of responsibility of the jobs and so on and so forth. But I think but anyways, I think we've had an amazing conversation. I always enjoy speaking with you, Rick. Thank you so much for everything. I think to wrap up, I would love to ask you, because I'm building up a list of books that I want to read now that I've finished my second master's in mental health counseling. I'm like, you know what? I want to read for fun, and so I'm asking my network what book they would recommend me to read, or to my audience. So if you want to
Yep.
share maybe one or two recommendations, I would love to
Yeah.
hear what you recommend.
Yeah. Like oh, when you say for fun, do you mean professional fun or like,
That's the thing about me, that fun is learning. Like I just love learning. I'm just a continuous
yeah, well, that's
learner.
good.
So really when it's fun, it doesn't have to be nonfiction or anything,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it could be whatever, but yeah.
The things that strike me, in fact, you asked it on LinkedIn, and I think I said the same thing.
Mhm.
I'm a big advocate of Michael Porter's version of strategy. It's a classic, and it still holds it to me. It's a good way to think about the business, both in terms of the external environment and what you do internally to sort of compete in that. So I love his work. There's also a woman named Joan Magretta, Magretta. She wrote a book on, I'm paraphrasing the title, but she goes from high level strategy all the way down to tactics. It's a short read, but very, very, very powerful. And she's she was at the time a Harvard Business Review, or a Harvard professor in the business school. Last one I'll add is there's this newer version of strategy called Blue Ocean Strategy. And uh, I think the last name is Kim. And then there's another author too. But Blue Ocean Strategy is a fantastic book. It says, let every other company fight for this market share. Let them, and that's the red ocean, right? Like everybody's fighting there. Try to find a market where not much going on and you can go in and sort of be the front runner very quickly. Very compelling story. And Porter and that one play together pretty well too, if you think about it that way. Um,
Beautiful.
So
So
those are
what
the
we'll do
three
is,
that
yeah,
I
what
think
we'll do
of
is
right away.
when we share this, we'll have the list of recommendations in the comments. And we'll
Yep,
also have a year chapter book in there as well when work works. Yeah.
good, good, good.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Well, that's it. This is the end. Thank you so much, Rick.
Hey, always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.